Welcome back, guys. Today we're going to take a look at the 2016 Canadian horror thriller movie called American Mary. The movie starts with a woman named Mary Mason making incisions into a turkey with a scalpel and then sewing it back together. She checks it and the professor, Dr. Alan Grant, notices that she is not paying attention. He calls her out and asks her a few questions on the subject, to which she answers perfectly. The professor berates Mary and then goes back to teaching. After the class, Mary apologizes to Dr. Grant and promises it won't happen again. Later in the parking garage, Mary is on call with a bank. She is having money troubles when their professor passes by. He looks at her for a bit and then leaves. Mary returns to her apartment and takes off her coat. She then takes a call from her nana. She asks Mary how medical school is going, and Mary puts her on speaker while she scrolls through a website on her laptop. She is looking for a way to earn money when she comes across an advertisement for a club. The club is looking for women who are willing to give sensual massages and private dances. She replies to that ad and goes for an interview. She arrives at the club Bourbon a Go-Go and asks for the owner. The dancer points Mary towards Billy, and she goes and talks to him. He takes her to his office, and Mary hands him her resume. He checks out her body and asks her to give him a massage. Suddenly, one of Billy's enforcers, Lance, appears and tells him about a situation. Billy has to go check it out and tells Mary to wait in his office. After a moment, he comes back and asks Mary if she would like to make $5,000 tonight without showing him her body. She agrees to make fast cash. He takes her to a room where a man is lying on a table covered in blood and whimpering. He has a long slashing wound on his chest and face. Billy asks Mary to save him. She performs on him and fixes him up. She then returns back to her loft and gets in the shower. She starts sobbing and is traumatized by that night. After showering, she holds a baseball bat in her hands and sits on the sofa staring blankly into space. The next morning, she wakes up with the bat in her hand. Her phone is ringing. She answers and there's an unknown woman, Beatrice, calling Mary by her name. She gets scared and hangs up. Then another person from a restaurant where she works part-time calls her and delivers her the news about the restaurant closing down. Mary is eating her breakfast and crying softly when a doorbell starts ringing. She answers the door and there is a package for her to sign. She opens the door and a woman enters her apartment and introduces herself as Beatrice Johnson. She tells Mary about how she found her by her resume at the club. She offers Mary some cash just to listen to her. She tells her about a girl who wants to have an unconventional surgery, the kind that hospitals don't offer. At first, Mary refuses, but when Beatrice tells her about the money, she agrees to meet her. Later, she is working on her laptop when her phone starts to ring. She picks it up and it's Dr. Grant. He reprimands her for missing his class. After that, she goes to a veterinary clinic where Beatrice's niece, Tessa, works as a receptionist. Tessa has offered the clinic for surgery. Beatrice introduces Mary to her niece and then to her friend, Ruby. She explains to her what surgery she wants Mary to perform on her. Ruby tells her that she wants to look like a doll so she doesn't have to feel ashamed when naked. She wants Mary to remove the excess parts of her body so she can look a bit more like a doll. Mary is confused for a bit, so she asks Beatrice if Ruby really wants this. Beatrice assures her and Mary then goes off to perform surgery on Ruby. She puts her under anesthesia and marks the areas to be removed. She then performs the surgery and stitches up all the areas. After the procedure, she tells Beatrice some precautions that Ruby should take. She advises her to not mention her name or give out any information to anyone. After that, Mary returns to her apartment and she throws up in the restroom. The next day, Mary is at the hospital doing her residency with some of her classmates. Dr. Walsh is teaching them, and after a moment, he asks Mary to go tell the family that their father had a heart attack. Dr. Walsh is teaching the residents about how to deliver bad news to patients. He then congratulates Mary on her great performance. On her break, Mary heads out of the hospital to call her nana when she sees Beatrice standing next to her car. Beatrice has brought a gift from Ruby. Mary takes the box and puts it inside the car, and Dr. Grant sees her outside. She then heads back to the hospital, and in the hallway, Dr. Walsh and Dr. Grant are having a conversation when she passes by. Walsh then invites her to a party they are having tonight. Afterwards, we see Mary getting ready when she opens up her laptop and searches the modeling website of Ruby. She clicks on a link and the website about body modification opens. She looks through some of the pages, gets overwhelmed, and closes her laptop. Mary then goes to the party, and a man opens the door and greets her. He offers her a drink. Walsh then comes around and introduces him as Dr. Black. After a moment, Dr. Grant joins the conversation. He takes her to the bar, and Walsh then offers her another drink. Mary takes the glass and starts drinking it. A few moments later, everything starts to fade away. Her vision starts blurring and she loses control of her motor muscles. Grant is talking to her when Mary starts to hobble. Grant takes her to a bedroom and puts her on the bed and grabs a camera. He holds her down and strangles her, and he starts to film it. Mary is not fully conscious and feels powerless as Grant opens his belt and assaults her. The next morning, Mary wakes up to Grant in bed. She picks up her things and returns to her apartment. She then goes to Billy and offers him $5,000 in exchange for something. Next, we see Mary putting on lipstick in the mirror when her door knocks. She hands Billy the money, and he and Lance leaves. She puts on some music, and we see Dr. Grant lying on a table in her room. He has a mouth opener attached to his face and is moaning as Mary picks up a syringe from the tray. She then explains to Grant that she had left medical school and is thinking about doing body modification surgeries. She wants to practice on him as a test subject so she doesn't make any mistakes while performing on her patients. She injects 2 syringes on either side of his mouth and takes out his tongue to split it. After that, we see Mary doing well in her apartment as she is meeting new patients who want body modifications to express themselves better. She meets another patient who wants a piercing. She gets angry and calls Lance to take him out. She comes out of her place and there's a detective named Doler outside. He starts questioning her about the disappearance of Dr. Grant. Mary doesn't tell the detective anything, and the detective leaves and Lance arrives as they go out for lunch. The next scene starts with Billy watching one of the dancers performing in his club. He then starts to fantasize about the dancer as Mary is dancing in front of her. She is doing a very seductive dance in his imagination when Mary comes to him and snaps him back to reality. She tells Billy about the detective that's been bothering her and that Dr. Walsh might be involved in the incident at the party at night. Mary has come to the club to meet Beatrice. She wants to take Mary out for a coffee. They both go out for a walk and Beatrice takes her to Ruby's house. Ruby is out of town, but she wanted Mary to have something. Mary looks around the room and finds a picture of Ruby and her husband. Beatrice gives her a card that Ruby has left on the table. It has information about the owner of the biggest body modification website, Abstract. The owners are coming to town and they want her to perform surgery on them. In the next scene, we see 2 women getting out of the car in front of the club. They have lots of piercings on their back. The twins enter the club and one of them kisses a dancer and bites off her tongue. They then meet with Mary in the club. These women are the owners of the website who wanted Mary to work on them. Mary offers them the drink and the sisters explain that they do not want to lose each other and want their connection to be eternal. So they ask Mary to exchange their left arms with each other and some other modifications as well. After the meeting, Mary has a drink with Billy, and he offers to help her by arranging another doctor to help Mary in the operation of the twins. Mary and the other doctor anesthetize the girls and cut off their arms. They switch them and also make the other modifications requested by the sisters. We then see Billy beating up someone and throwing them down the stairs. Meanwhile, Mary returns to an abandoned warehouse. It is revealed that Dr. Grant is still alive. Mary has locked him up in a room, and he is hanging on a chain passed through the skin on his back. Grant doesn't have any limbs left. All of his appendages have been used to practice on by Mary. She takes a few pictures of Grant for her own website, and while she is examining his body, a security officer enters the room and hits Mary in the head with a baton. The officer starts to unchain Grant when Mary hits the guard in the leg and picks up the baton. She sits on him and doesn't stop hitting until he's dead. Since then, she gets up and uses a taser on Dr. Grant, who's crawling on the floor trying to escape. Meanwhile, we see Billy beating up someone when his phone rings. He is about to pick up Mary's call but misses it. He then calls Lance and asks him to get in touch with Mary. In the next scene, we see Ruby in a room with her husband. He has bought flowers for her, and Ruby undresses her robe and her husband is shocked to see the new changes on her body. In the meantime, Lance brings Mary some dinner. Lance tells her a story about her mother to comfort her about the recent incident. He appreciates the work Mary is doing and advises her to not stop. She then drinks the chocolate milkshake. The next morning, she goes to her apartment to check up on the twins, and after that, the sisters leave and pay Mary a handsome amount of money. Mary changes her residence and buys herself a new flat. In her new flat, she photographs a few of her patients and sees one of her patients afterwards. While examining, she receives a call from the detective. He wants to meet her for some more questioning. She quickly gets the patient out and closes her clinic. She then takes off her overall coat and opens the door to let Detective Doler inside. He tells him that Dr. Walsh is also missing now. Mary offers him a drink, which she poisons. The detective tells her about the tapes they have found on girls that have been involved in these immoral parties. The parties were hosted by both the doctors. Meanwhile, we see Billy watching the tape of Mary on her laptop. The detective wants to help Mary, but just as he's about to drink from the glass, Mary takes it away from him and offers him another one. Mary still refuses to tell him anything, and the detective leaves. After, she calls her Nana when someone else picks it up and she finds out her Nana is dead. She is shocked to hear the news. She then deletes her Nana's contact. Mary then visits the club to meet Billy in his office when we see he is busy with some stripper. Billy dismisses the stripper and they go to another room to talk. Mary asks about Dr. Walsh's disappearance and he acknowledges it and apologizes for killing him. When Mary asks him if he had found a tape of her, he refuses. Mary then gets up and goes to the toilet. When she enters the restrooms, all the ladies leave, but the new stripper from Billy's office stays. She goes into one of the washrooms. Mary takes off her coat and pulls out a different kind of knives. She forces the girl out of the washroom and holds a scalpel to her neck to scare her, and then lets her go. Outside of the club, she runs into the stripper again. Mary apologizes and warns her to stay away from Billy. After that, we see Billy on his laptop seeing the film of Mary massaging him on her interview on the first day. He then starts to fantasize again, and in his fantasy, Mary is dancing on his lap and has a scalpel on her hand. She teases him for a bit and stabs him through the abdomen. Billy starts to bleed and wakes up from the fantasy. Later, we see him sitting at the bar when Mary comes to meet him. They both share a drink, and Billy tells her about how Beatrice has quit the club and is missing. He asks Mary to move to LA with him for a change of pace. She says that she'll think about it. After Mary returns to her loft, where her phone starts to ring and she hangs up and opens the door. Her phone rings again and she answers. It's Beatrice and she starts speaking in a very low voice. Her voice is breaking and Mary doesn't understand what she is saying. We see Beatrice laying on the floor in Ruby's house with a phone in her hand. She is wounded and beaten badly. She tries to warn Mary about Ruby's husband. Suddenly, there is a man in Mary's flat and he attacks her from behind. She struggles, but he drives a knife through her belly and wounds her. Mary takes out the knife and plunges it into Ruby's husband. She then crawls on the floor and opens the door to her clinic, where she is bleeding all over the floor. She knocks over a tray stand and grabs a needle and some scissors. She then starts to stitch up her wound. The movie ends with the police at her apartment examining the crime scene. The police have found pictures of Dr. Walsh, and they see the body of Mary lying on the floor bleeding to death with scissors in her hand. With that, the movie ends. Thanks for watching, guys.